Thanks for staying with us on ABC 13 Weather Now. Joining me now is Houston Chronicle meteorologist Justin Ballard, and happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, did you indulge in any wine during your birthday celebration?
It's hard not to, so yes.
Exactly right. Well, you know what? We are going to be talking about winemaking today and how that can be impacted by climate change. So just give us a little broad, quick overview of what we're talking about today.
And of course, Valentine's Day is coming up, so wine is kind of an important topic this time of the year. So too is chocolate. We'll get to that conversation on Wednesday, so stay tuned for that.
Okay.
But in terms of wine, certainly Texas, I didn't realize this, Texas is actually the fifth highest producing kind of winery, wine producing state is what I'm trying to say. So, you know, obviously the stakes are high when it comes to wine production and climate change, especially right here in the state of Texas. So here's just a couple of wine stats for you. Texas is home to more than 9,000 acres of producing vineyards. And a lot of people, myself included, didn't realize 80% of all wine made in Texas, roughly around that number, comes from the Texas Panhandle. The High Plains. Yeah. And this, of course, the entire industry adds more than $20 billion to the state's economy, with the wine industry bringing in 2 million visitors and about $685 million every single year. So it's big business here in Texas. But what does that mean when we're talking about the potential for climate change?
Exactly.
Changing the taste of our, wine here. So there's a couple of things that really go towards harming the taste, the flavor, if you will, of wine. A couple of those things here: heat, floods, and smoke. Obviously, you're seeing all this gorgeous, scenery from area wineries.
Grapes are so delicate.
Probably California. Grapes are very delicate, and all of these factors can really contribute to, the flavor, or possibly the lack thereof, or, a different sort of flavor than you may want to have, especially when it comes to smoke. With your wineries in California, especially. Obviously, we are no stranger to heat and floods here in this part of Texas. And also something else I found out. I spoke with Ryan Levy, who is the winemaker and owner of Nice Wines here in Houston.
Yes.
He said the freeze in 2021 was tremendously impactful, devastating for his winery.
Right. Talk a little more about that, because we're coming from, soon to be 4 years since that freeze. Is he still feeling some of the impacts from that?
Believe it or not, yes.
Really?
He absolutely is. So of the total number of vineyards or vines that he had, 30% of those were completely ruined. You're seeing some of the footage there from that February 2021 deep freeze. 30% ruined. Now, that means he and his team had to go up and, kind of uproot every single vine and replant when it was, a little warmer and able to do so. So obviously this is big impacts, and they're just now hoping to kind of fully recover in the 2025 season from the 2021 freeze. 4 years later.
Because you had to wait for all of the new vines to grow. So I guess at the end of the day, we talked a little about the weather, how it can impact the grapes. You just talked about them losing business. Can climate change impact the cost of wine? I think that's a big question everybody wants to know.
I think there's certainly the potential for it. When I'm speaking with Ryan, he told me that the price of wine is a little harder to pin down when it comes to climate change, because those factors like warming climate and where the wine is produced doesn't necessarily go into the price of the finished product. What really matters is whether or not we're talking about mass-produced wine versus sort of smaller batch or family-owned wines. But certainly temperatures across the state are warming over the last, since 1970. We're looking at this data coming from Climate Central, and I want to draw your attention to two really big wine producing regions here in Texas, the Panhandle and then of course Hill Country. And those warming zones are 2 to 3 degrees since 1970. That is a significant amount of warming, and that of course kind of contributes to the potential, at least for in the future, wine, kind of the flavor of wine changing, especially if we have to use more heat-resistant grapes.
I was going to say 2 to 3 degrees to us, that might not be a big difference. But for plants and seasonal vegetation, plants that are used to very specific conditions, I'm sure that's a big impact.
Yeah, and those temperatures were growing season average temperatures. So for April to October, not only is our growing season extending in Texas as a whole, it's also warming significantly since 1970.
Right, and we've been monitoring climate change and winemaking in other parts of the country, right? You talked about Napa and California, but also New England as well. When I worked in Buffalo, I was surprised that they had a little winemaking region there.
They absolutely do. So wine and winemaking is actually something that can be done in, a number of different climates. It's interesting. When I was speaking with Ryan earlier last week, he actually told me that sparkling wine in England is being more produced, and it's actually comparable to some of the finest champagnes that grow in the Champagne region of France. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean the costs of those things are going down anytime soon.
Well, that's nice to hear. They're making the most of climate change and adjusting to it.
Yes.
Sounds good. Well, a fascinating conversation. I know you teased ahead to what we're talking about on Wednesday, but here's Justin's article on the Chronicle. It's called Valentine's Day Chocolates and Wines Are Getting More Expensive to Make Thanks to Climate Change. Oh, climate change. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Justin, and we'll see you later this week on ABC 13 Weather Now.